On January 20, 2025, Donald J. Trump returned to the White House as the 47th President of the United States. His campaign had made sweeping promises, from sweeping immigration reforms to reshaping U.S. energy policy, from judicial changes to redefining America's role in the world. But as with all presidents, the gap between promise and action is where the story lies. This documentary will explore what he pledged in 2024, what he has done so far in his second mandate, and what that tells us about power, politics, and America's future. His campaign in economy. Trump pledged large tax cuts. During the campaign he promised to cut taxes by more than $7 trillion over 10 years. He also pushed trade protectionist policies. Increased tariffs, reciprocal tariffs, example, 10 to 20% non-domestic goods, especially higher tariffs on China, and he promised to lower energy bills, bring down inflation, reduce costs for ordinary Americans. One of his early executive orders, O. 14178, relates to digital financial technology, revoking a previous order on digital assets, prohibiting central bank digital currency. While not a tax cut per se, that is regulatory economic policy. He reinstated or expanded tariffs in some contexts. For example, O. 14245 imposes a 25% tariff on goods imported from any country that imports Venezuelan oil. On economic indicators, reporting by Washington Post suggests that though he promised to end inflation and cut energy bills, inflation has not decisively fallen, and the economy showed contraction in certain metrics at the 100-day mark. There is alignment in approach. Use of tariffs, regulatory shifts instead of only legislative tax cuts. But many promised tax cut measures require congressional approval, and some haven't yet been delivered. Some actions are symbolic or regulatory rather than systemic fiscal policy changes. It's early in the mandate. Outcomes, jobs, wages, consumer prices, may lag behind orders and rhetoric. His campaign promises on immigration and border. Trump promised the largest U.S. deportation operation in history, and to terminate every open borders policy of the Biden administration on day one. He pledged to complete the southern border wall, wrap up wall construction that was unfinished in his first term. He also indicated he would end or severely restrict birthright citizenship via executive order and aggressively enforce immigration enforcement. According to Washington Post tracking, on the first day he declared a national emergency at the southern border with the stated purpose to complete wall construction. Some construction of border wall segments has reportedly resumed under Department of Homeland Security. However, efforts like ending birthright citizenship face legal and constitutional barriers, and haven't been completed. The administration is following through on aggressive immigration enforcement rhetoric via executive actions. Legal constraints and court challenges remain major obstacles, example, constitutional claims on birthright citizenship. The scale, largest deportation operation, remains aspirational. Implementation details and volume of deportations remain to be documented. Campaign promises on foreign policy. Trump pledged to reassert American leadership globally, renegotiate trade relationships, push back on involvement he sees as disadvantageous. Though less detailed in some areas, his campaign rhetoric emphasized America first in global affairs, prioritizing U.S. sovereignty, reducing certain multilateral commitments, and pushing tougher stances on some issues. One major executive order, O. 14162, withdraws the United States from the Paris Agreement and related international climate commitments. Another, O. 14155, withdraws the U.S. from the World Health Organization, WHO. He implemented tariffs tied to foreign-produced goods or countries tied to oil. Example, Venezuelan oil imports. Many foreign policy adjacent actions reflect nationalism and sovereignty priorities, pulling out of multilateral agreements, renegotiating terms or removing membership. These are mostly executive order level rather than treaty level or congressional treaty negotiations. In many cases they can be reversed by future administrations or legal challenge. The real test will be how these changes affect US relationships, alliances, trade partners, international obligations, but early signs show alignment with campaign promises of scaling back multilateral entanglements. Campaign promises on climate and environment. Trump's campaign signaled that he would roll back what he considers restrictive climate regulation, boost fossil fuel production, remove barriers on energy production, reduce US participation in international climate pacts. He positioned energy independence, lower regulation, and domestic resource development as economic as well as political priorities. O14,162 ordered the US out of the Paris Agreement again. A different order, O14,148, rescinds multiple Biden-era executive orders including environmental regulations and policies. Media reporting, The Guardian, notes that on day one he declared a national energy emergency, rolled back restrictions on fossil fuel production, such as export pauses, auto emissions standards, and suspended offshore wind leasing. The climate and environment agenda shows rapid action via executive order to reverse or pause climate-friendly regulation. This aligns tightly with campaign promises to favor fossil fuel production and reduce what he calls burdensome regulation. But it also opens lines of legal challenge and potential conflict with state governments, regulators, and courts. Long-term environmental and economic impacts, example, on emissions, climate risks, infrastructure investments, will take years to assess. Early moves suggest major pivot away from climate mitigation frameworks. Campaign promises on judicial, legal and corruption. Trump emphasized appointing conservative judges, reducing what he portrays as federal overreach, restoring law and order, and pushing back on what he calls corruption in government. He also campaigned on promises to pardon some individuals, example, supporters of January 6th, and reform DOJ processes. One of his early orders, O14,190, bans certain indoctrination in K-12 schooling, critical race theory, gender ideology themes, tied to legal, education policy more than courts, but part of his cultural legal agenda. Also reported that he signed orders on free speech protections, ordering investigations into whether federal agencies infringed free speech during the prior administration. There are likely judicial, legal battles to come. Executive orders alone don't guarantee durable legal change without cases before courts. Much of what has been done so far is via executive branch authority rather than judicial appointments, which occur more slowly. Some orders aim to reshape legal, regulatory frameworks or signal alignment with conservative legal priorities. The true impact will hinge on appointments to courts, how judicial challenges proceed, and whether corruption or oversight reforms are substantive or symbolic. Campaign promises on social policy. Trump's campaign signaled conservative stances on education, speech, gender ideology and LGBTQ-related policy, school curricula, and cultural value issues. He also pledged to repeal or replace parts of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, adjust social welfare policy, and protect Social Security, example, no taxes on Social Security income. Executive Order 14,190 prohibits K-12 schooling from teaching gender ideology or equity ideology that the administration deems anti-American or subversive. Other orders rescinding diversity, equity and inclusion, DEI, federal policy or regulations. O14,148, rescissions, includes day policy rollbacks. Reporting indicates forthcoming executive order to designate English as the official language of the United States. Social policy thus far is being shaped through executive orders aimed at education content, federal day policies, and symbolic cultural policy changes. These are consistent with his campaign rhetoric on patriotic education, limiting what he calls indoctrination, and reinforcing conservative cultural values in government policy. As with other areas, legislation may be required to make lasting changes. Executive orders may face legal challenge or reversal by future administrations. In his second mandate, Donald Trump has moved quickly to enact many of the campaign-level priorities he articulated in 2024. Through executive orders, he has signaled a sharp shift in regulation, international commitment, education policy, and immigration enforcement. Yet many of these actions remain in their early stages. Some are symbolic, others trigger legal challenge, and many will take years to measure in real-world impact. The tension between promise and delivery is especially evident when campaign rhetoric meets the constraints of law, courts, Congress, and public reaction. As this presidency continues, the key questions remain. Will these actions translate into measurable outcomes? Will Congress partner, or resist? Will the courts uphold, or strike down, these policies? And above all, how will they shape the lives of Americans in the years to come? Follow and subscribe us for getting more deeply documentaries on time.